Okay, that's probably sufficient. I'll start. So hello, my name is John Mulligan. I've been one of the maintainers of go-ceph for over a year now, and I think this is our first public discussion of the project. It's been around for a while, but we've kind of tried to revitalize it, and that leads me into my first slide, which is a brief history of go-ceph. According to Git history, the project was started in 2014 by Noah Watkins. Me and the other maintainers, we joined the project and started our activity there in October of 2019. A few months later, we started using Go modules, which was a somewhat recent development in the Go community. It was one of our first big steps to kind of revitalize the library. And in addition to that, we were able to start doing tagged releases February of 2020. That was our first official release of 0.2. We've done 9 more releases since then. We have a every 2 months release cadence. And generally, I've been scheduling our release dates on the second Tuesday of the month that the release falls on. And our recent release was this week, v0.10, on Tuesday. I just want to talk a few brief highlights on the state of the project. When we started, there were 3 primary modules or packages, CephFS, Rados, and RBD, covering those significant chunks of the Ceph APIs. These were wrappers around the C APIs using the CGO binding utility. One of our main goals is to provide all the power of the Ceph APIs while keeping them looking like Go functions, not exposing everyone to the C aspects of everything. I'd say a significant chunk of the work we do is on the RBD APIs. There's quite a lot of them, and one of our most important consumers is the Ceph CSI project, and a lot of the activity around those APIs has been driven by that project and their needs. A couple of the most recent important topics include RBD mirroring and snapshots, as well as some recent work around getting proper thick or thin image provisioning. Again, that was driven by the CSI team as well. Beyond the libraries that wrap libRados, libRBD, we've recently developed various sub-packages. I've been calling the admin packages. The first was CephFS admin, and this uses the equivalent functions that the Ceph command does. It uses, for lack of a better word, the JSON API, or command API. And then we've recently grown admin packages for RBD as well as RGW. RBD and CephFS work similarly using that JSON API, while RGW uses a new HTTP REST-style API. And that is, those last two are new in our release this week. So what are we talking about coming up in the short term? We have a few RBD mirroring functions that still need to be completed. And then after that, we'll be looking into CephFS mirroring functions. I believe these are new in Pacific. There is still significant chunks of the Ceph APIs that we do not wrap. Well, I don't think we'll all, plan to wrap everything. We probably need a good measurement / understanding of what we do or don't want to wrap explicitly. There's always stuff going on behind the scenes as well. Recently, one of my teammates, Sven Anderson, was working on performance enhancements around sharing buffers between Go and C. It's a very interesting development. And just other general background tasks. As we've grown, I've come to think of us, and this kind of fits in with the recent ad of the RGW stuff, that go-ceph wants to be the place for library code when you're interacting directly with a Ceph cluster when you're writing in the Go language. Lastly, and we'll see how the conversation goes, but these are some of the challenges I see going forward with the project. We need to improve our change or PR velocity. We had pretty good velocity last year. We had a few speed bumps this year. I have some thoughts on how to improve that, but I'd love to discuss that with the wider community. Like many open source projects, we could improve our documentation. One outstanding PR is to create a developer's guide to help people who want to contribute to the project. And then lastly, the library is currently a V0 library, and when you use Go modules, the standard is that you can have API breaking changes as long as you're V0. It basically means you haven't really released, which isn't really true, and there are libraries in perpetual V0 state, and we're kind of there right now, but I don't want to be. So at some point, we really ought to go to V1. But when we do that, we have a compatibility promise to keep. So we need to do some planning around deciding what deprecated APIs we really ought to drop or clean up. And if there are APIs that are very important and we want to experiment them, we should do that sooner rather than later, so that if we have to make an API break and change, we do it while we're in V0 still. And so that's the end of my slides. Hopefully I didn't take too long. I think I took longer than I should. So I will stop talking, and this can be a proper BoF session following this. Thanks. If no one has anything else to say, I have a list of topics too, but I'd like to hear from you folks first.
Hey, John, question for you.
Hello.
Hello. Would you be interested at all in go-ceph in having some sort of access to the admin socket for the daemons?
I have a rough idea of what that is. I know there's some interaction with the JSON API in that segment, but maybe fill me in a little bit more on the technical detail.
Yeah, so like my understanding is the admin socket's used primarily for like low-level debugging or poking of the various daemons. We use it quite a bit internally to expand on the number of metrics that we can export from the low-level, especially OSD stats. So I mean, we have a rudimentary implementation of an ASOC wrapper that we use internally. And I've been kind of toying with the idea at some point of trying to contribute something to go-ceph that would be better than the implementation that we have internally. I just wasn't sure if there would be interest in that.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. I probably need to look at it a little more to understand exactly what you mean. But yeah, generally, if it's something that interacts with the Ceph cluster directly, the distinction I'm trying to make, maybe if I should clarify, is that obviously you can write Go code that talks to a fuse mount that's mounting CephFS, or you can use the S3 APIs in Go to talk to RGW. But for the stuff that's like very Ceph specific, I'm very open to hearing suggestions for what go-ceph can take and make use of. kind of treating the project and the various submodules as, well, here's how you make administrative changes to StephFS. Here's how you want to use Go to set up RPD mirroring. Use these API calls. So in general, yeah, I'm pretty interested to hear about that kind of thing.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'll just keep it in my mental list for now then. I just wanted to make sure there was interest. Thanks.
So
I would
no
be
activity in the chat
curious.
so far.
Sorry. Here's Sven. I'm also one of the developers for go-ceph. I'm really curious how many users of go-ceph are actually online here at the moment. Can we find that out? Maybe with a chat, or I don't know. Because probably many people are just interested in general, but I'm curious if there are people who actually use it already.
And maybe not just people, but I'm curious what other projects are using go-ceph that we might know about besides the CSI driver.
Right. We know the CSI driver, of course, and we know that with the advent of the RGW admin, the next user will be Rook for doing these RGW operations. But yeah, so these are the ones we know about. But like, what else? Anybody else?
I know of one or two others I don't remember exactly, but we've been contacted a couple of times through issues about this or that thing. Not sure how mature those projects are, but there are a couple other ones out there. A couple were using very old versions of go-ceph when I looked at the repo on GitHub. But so there's some stuff out in the wild. But yeah, the main ones I know about are the ones that have been mentioned.
So I just want to add what Michael said. So Wookiees plan to use it, and apart from that, I am trying to develop the go-ceph driver for RGW, which also plan to use go-ceph for RDOS admin commands. So yeah, but the driver is a PI's initial stage, nothing merged or nothing productized at the moment. So I just want.
Was that Cozy, COSI?
Yeah.
I was about to ask. I didn't really get it. Okay, good.
Yeah, it's like cloud object storage. It's like CSI, but for object, right, Jiffin?
Right.
Yeah, it's for CSI for object.
Kind of the standardization of we previously had with the libbucket provisioner library. That was kind of an ad hoc thing, and now it's properly standardized. Yeah, that's right. Cool.
Since I see Sven's thumb, I'll mention that, throw this out there. You, Sven, you've been working on getting go-ceph working on Mac recently. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, that was not really like a goal from the beginning, but since I have Mac now, I wanted to, it all started with the header files on Mac missing when I want to compile go-ceph. And so I worked together with Kev, who is also part of the Ceph team, because he wants, in Mac, we have a kind of packaging system, which is called Brew. And there once was a Brew package for go-ceph client, for Ceph client at least. And so I just asked him if we can get that running again. And so, yeah, one thing led to the other. And now actually, there's a package again on Brew. So you can install the Ceph client just with Brew, install Ceph client, and also installs the headers. So you can just build go-ceph as you would be used to also on Linux. And I didn't do extensive testing with it, but at least it compiles, which was already a big step, because there were a couple of like Linux specific things which we had to remove. And yeah, but now it seems to work. It's quite nice. Although probably not many people will use it from Mac, but it's possible. And it's also a nice way to find out where you have unnecessary Linux dependencies, which you actually maybe don't want to have. Also for FreeBSD or whatever.
Yeah, that's one of the nice things about running as a user space component. If it's clean, it doesn't matter. As long as you compile and can run the Go binary, you don't need stuff like Fuse or stuff like that. So I think that's one advantage to the libraries that I really appreciate. Pull up my topics list.
So yeah, one of the topics I think is really interesting here and in that forum would be how we can get a better idea about the priorities, what to implement first, and what are the demands from the people actually using it. So because first of all, often we don't know who is actually using it, and then we also don't know what they need most. So that was really interesting from Joshua, that hint about the sockets. Stuff like that would be interesting to have on a regular basis, like a feedback from where we can have a priority list of stuff that besides Ceph CSI with CSI, what is the demands in the community? What are the demands?
Yeah. The other day, a colleague was showing me a new tool from Google, which can see more dependencies. I can throw the link in chat after I dig it up later. And then I've noticed that sometimes the package documentation tool from the Go project can show you some things that are consuming your library, but I don't know how reliable these are. But in the if there's not enough feedback, we can always kind of peek to see, using these tools, what people might be using. It's kind of the curse of being a library, is no one's obligated to tell you what you're being used for.
I mean, probably we could just use issues which people can vote on, or I don't know what is the usual thing to do on GitHub to find out, to have a list of priorities and then see what is most important. But although I don't know if there would be enough feedback that it's worth to set it up at all. So maybe direct communication is enough already.
Yeah, I agree about the sense of it. Fortunately, no one's shouting out, "I want this" in this meeting, so please do if you're here and you want to yell. Let's see. Oh yeah, thanks. That's what I think you already saw that, Sven. This is I didn't catch that chat before. All right.
I'm not sure what you're talking about, like the message from Joshua?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry.
Yes,
I should be more specific. You don't know what I'm looking at. All right. So I'll take this opportunity to talk a little bit more about the road to v10. Part of it's on me. One thing I keep planning on doing and then finding the time to not do it is to actually document our existing deprecated APIs. We've marked most of them with GoDoc, but there's still a few rough edges that we should probably deal with. Places where there wasn't maybe as much API design, and it was kind of grew together organically. The one that bugs me the most is our error handling, because the errors are different in every of the sub packages. So CephFS has different error handling than Rados and RBD. Kind of annoying because Ceph ultimately, for all the API calls, is returning error nodes. We kind of have a generic framework for that, but it's partly hidden and partly obfuscated, which were originally good for some good reasons, but it turns out you get some odd results. The one I saw the other day was a call that has nothing to do with an RBD image. It's an RBD function call, but it was saying the RBD image doesn't exist. Oh, right, because we coded it that way. So those are hard things in Go to change without kind of breaking your API. Traditionally, some calls scrape the error text. There are better ways to do that. Go provides errors.is and errors.as nowadays. But I'm always nervous about breaking things that could easily be consumed by people. So I want to get it all together in kind of a document, and then we can start making rational decisions about, this is a priority. We should probably fix this or clean this up sooner rather than later. I have in my head the dream of like maybe early next year going to 1.0, but this is kind of fantasy. I don't know how real it is.
And still, even if we have 1.0, I wish we could have some kind of like better API or something. I mean, I'm not sure about the rules of Go.
You can always, we can add things. So growing the API and marking, function call X or Y is deprecated is totally fine within the V1 series. We just can't take anything away. That's the compatibility promise that the Go community expects. You can create a V2, but when you do that, it's some extra steps so that the versions are very distinct and projects can continue to use V1 as long as they want to consume it.
Yeah, I was more talking about like getting feedback for an early version, which is not finalized yet. So let's say we want an API for this, but we are not sure this is a good API. Please use it and give feedback. So there should be a possibility even after 1.0 to introduce something as a technical preview or whatever. And
without using those exact terms, that's what we kind of did for the admin modules as we added them. So in the release notes for whatever releases ago, when CephFS admin was new, I wrote in the release notes, hey, we're going to reserve the right to kind of tweak the API over the next couple of releases. And I did the same thing for RGW admin and RBD admin for the latest release. So we have some flexibility. I just figure as time passes, we want to be a little bit more conservative about what we change, even though there's no promise. I just hate the idea of breaking things when I know projects are consuming the library.
But I guess there's no official way to mark certain APIs or functions as preliminary or something. So
only in my imaginary programming language, it doesn't exist. Not in Go, unfortunately. I mean, you can put comments in the doc comments, but I can't rely on people to look at them. Speaking of documentation, let me complain a moment for GoDoc, because it's great at documenting your API, but I find it very frustrating because there isn't really a framework for writing prose and explaining things. I'm used to Sphinx from the Python community, and I find it much better in that you can actually write docs and then have it incorporate API documentation automatically. But the latter part is the only thing I can tell that GoDoc does. You can write prose in the module comment, but it's pretty basic. So if anyone knows alternatives that work well with Go, I would love to hear about them.
Yeah. Also, we could maybe how do they do it for the official Go stuff? Like something with -x or something, go-ceph -x or a sub
Yeah.
package, and then
Oh,
move
you're
it
still
after
on
we
the.
finalize.
Yeah.
We can move.
That would be good for the previous topic of the compatibility stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I was.
It's okay.
Still mentally there.
I followed you. Well, we still have a few folks in the who have joined the meeting. Anyone just feel like saying something? I feel like we're doing most of the talking. It's all right, but I'd love to hear more from people who don't often talk about go-ceph. See a few people in the attendees list that I know from Red Hat. I feel like I want to call you out and see if I can make you say something. Well, all right. Go back to my topics list here. Yeah, everyone's being quiet today.
Yeah. Sage has left.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
All right. Well,
How long is our slot, by the way?
I
Another
think
10
we
minutes.
have like, yeah, something like that. I'll check the calendar invite.
I thought it's just half an hour. That's why I thought maybe.
There's about 10 minutes.
Yeah, we
left.
have 10 minutes.
Ah.
Thank you. Well, one thing we can talk about, since Sven and I are doing most of the talking, one thing that we've talked about one-on-one a couple times is improving the adoption of or velocity of our PRs. For a while, we had a kind of a 2 reviewer requirement. We've been thinking about relaxing this a little bit for non-API changes. Ben, the other day you were talking about Ceph's own processes, which I'm not particularly familiar with. You want to ask the audience, see if there's some people more involved with core Ceph that can talk a little bit about the way, what are the requirements for a PR merge?
Okay. Yeah. When you talk about velocity, I have 2 things in mind. One is like picking new, like doing the actual work, picking some API and implement it, and then also, of course, after you did it, velocity to get it merged more quick. Regarding Ceph, I only talked about the second part of the velocity. So I just found it interesting that it was kind of quite agile, or like they don't have like a strict rule, like 2 reviewers, or at least it appeared to me like that. I didn't check into the details, but it looked like, okay, if it is a small thing, it gets merged quite fast. And but if it is something that is more like going more deep, or like recently I made a PR for some redefining some defines for macOS or other platforms, and then they start to have a more like deeper review, and also like doing CI. It's interesting because Ceph only does, apparently I was surprised by that, only does the unit tests in the CI, the integration tests, or I'm not sure if it is called integration tests, but the bigger tests like of the whole functioning cluster, they are done kind of semi manually, and they batch them together like a couple of PRs, and then they test them. So that's probably also a way or a reason why they have to be more like dynamic and because they cannot test everything anyway. So yeah, but in general, I think we can do it also more like agile. Like if it is like just touching the make file, then it doesn't matter so much, and we can merge it more quickly. But
Yeah, I was thinking about some classification tags where we basically say, I don't know if we want a tag that said API or non-API or something like that, and said, as a developer, I'm telling you, none of the changes in my PR affect the API. And those could, I don't know if we could tell Mergify about the tag and have it change the requirements, but at the very least, the human being can say, oh, I don't need to wait for Mergify for this. It's already pre-tagged as non-API. I can jump in, look at it, just hit the merge button manually or something like that.
Yeah,
I'm
Mergify,
not entirely happy with
Mergify.
I'm not entirely happy with it, but it's done okay.
Yeah. Anyway, it's more like a matter of like how we agree because like technically we can merge already with one review. So at the current settings. So just
I heard another
to agree when we do that or not.
I'm not a developer. I'm an administrator guy, but I nowadays end up reading a Ceph code quite often, and I think that if there is in any development parts, if you can done some pre-flight checking for the code, that might speed up the reviewer time, but still I don't personally I see that 2 persons for reviewer is better than 1 or 0, because you might have a bad day and you slip away some code that there is some comma in the wrong place or hashtag or something which breaks actually things. And if you don't have any pre-flight checks that this is valid code or this affects on an API, for example, so it will change the output, for example, for some query. That shouldn't be like approved, like, yeah, this is fine, master commit, and that's done. I've done it many times, but still I feel that dropping away its second reviewer is not good unless you don't apply some pre-flight checks or rules that fix that need.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We do try to have a fair amount of automation using GitHub Actions. We have a checks, which is the fast running, go vet, and we use a tool called Revive, which checks for common Go gotchas and stuff like that. And then the test suite, for those who aren't aware, runs with kind of a all-in-one Ceph cluster within a container, and then our Go binary test suite runs. It's not a lot of unit tests. It's mostly what I would call integration tests, because the whole point of the library is integration. Most of our functions are fairly short wrappers around the C APIs of Ceph. But that said, we can certainly always be on the lookout for improved automation around that entire process. Certainly help us. How do I put it? Have a good feeling about the code before we start reading it with our eyes.
Yeah, well, in the future, AI might help you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, of course, that's very important, and we're talking only about like dropping the second review, of course, after all the automatic tests succeeded. Like it's more like things that you can more easily repair afterwards.
Yeah.
Compared to like API changes, which when they are out, basically it's hard to change them. So it's
right.
but if you break things, then you can still repair it before the next release. So
yeah, and we do things. We generate coverage, but we don't actually analyze it as part of the PR process. So you could try to say something like you have to have 90% net new coverage or whatever, but the automation around that's a little hard to write. That's something I actually looked into in the very first months of when I started working on go-ceph and went, oh, this is too hard right now. I'll look at it later. And similarly, I wrote a tool called Implements, which actually tries to look at what parts of the Ceph API we're covering. But one of the dependencies turned out to be very hard to run in the container, the base images we were using. So unfortunately, I had to turn it off. But I've been talking about that with some of the others, including you, Sven, about trying to get that tool back into the CI so that we have, for every run, we have a rough idea. Oh, we cover, 70% of the non-deprecated APIs in librvd or whatever. So coverage for our tests of the code we implement, and then coverage for how much of Ceph do we actually cover. That doesn't count things like the JSON APIs, because those we won't even have any idea. We have to analyze the code in Ceph that generates those. I've looked at it and I cannot claim I understand it yet. Well, I think we're just about at the end. I'll stop talking once more and give anyone a last chance to say something. Otherwise, I'll hand it back to Mike. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate you coming. Maybe we'll do this again sometime.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, John. And this concludes our for Thursday for our Ceph Month. We'll be continuing on Friday and for some other talks. These talks that we had today will be recorded and posted up on the Ceph YouTube channel as well. Thank you, everybody. All right. Have a good day or good evening, everyone.
You too.
Bye.
Thanks. Cheers.